Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Musical Notes. I'm one of your co hosts, Jonathan, and I'm joined by Nathan.
Hello.
Today, we will be exploring one of the best recent video game soundtracks, Octopath Traveler, composed by Yasunori Nishiki. With the recent release of Octopath Traveler 2, which you should also definitely check out the soundtrack for, we thought there is no better time to dive into the original soundtrack than right now. There are 5 main sections we want to cover today: some background information, the main theme, character location town themes, battle tracks, and the ending theme. So let's get started.
So first, what is Octopath Traveler? Well, Octopath Traveler is a role-playing game developed by Square Enix Games. It features an art style described by the developers as HD 2D, combining 2D pixel art with 3D environmental effects. This results in a unique visual style that calls back to the retro pixel art of the old days with beautiful, modern-looking environments. This art style, which composer Yasunori Nishiki described as a wonderful mix of both nostalgic and new, heavily influenced the game's soundtrack. Nishiki wanted a soundtrack that called back to both the old and evolved genre of video game music. However, what exactly is it that makes the Octopath soundtrack call back to older soundtracks? Well, for this we need a history lesson. Back in the days of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System era, the music of a video game was heavily limited by the consoles the video games were played on. The Super Nintendo systems were only able to produce a limited number of basic chiptune sounds, and these sounds were often shared between the game's sound effects and music. This meant there was often a limited number of voices that were able to be used for the game's music, usually 3. In addition, the music composed needed to be able to infinitely loop without getting boring in case a player sat on a screen forever. As a result of this, there is a tendency to focus on strong melodic writing for these video games, which is why old video game soundtracks were so catchy. Just think of Legend of Zelda or Mario.
Octopath Traveler also follows this mentality, and I think the melodicity of this soundtrack is definitely one of its defining features. This can be seen immediately in the main theme, which begins with a catchy melody played by the flute after only 2 bars of introduction. Nishiki did mention he wanted to look forward as well, and this is where the use of the orchestra comes in. While old game music aspired for the orchestra, the chiptune sounds can never compete with a full symphonic sound. In the main theme, a counter melody is introduced, played by the oboes and clarinets, before the melody reaches a half cadence. And without getting into the music theory, a half cadence is the ending of a musical phrase that does not sound finished. You could think of it as a question mark. The melody is then repeated with the addition of the horns and a higher finish. The piece then transitions to a second theme, a theme originally written to be the main theme of the video game. Again, the orchestral color here really shines through, with the glittering wind chimes and sparkling glockenspiel, which is like a xylophone but more sparkly, giving a sense of magic. And the somber strings create a sense of ancient nobility and pride impossible to match on the basic chiptune sounds of the Super Nintendo. Interestingly, the developers originally did not have an enthusiastic response to this theme, which is why it was not used as the main theme. It's nice that Nishiki got to incorporate it though, as the orchestration really makes it magical. The piece then briefly transitions to a third theme. It is important to note that Nishiki had already composed about half of the soundtrack at this point, so this theme is based off the Victory Fanfare theme. After this, the main theme returns, already giving the listener a sense of familiarity with it. The main theme is repeated again and again, slowly building in grandeur as the orchestration gets increasingly complex, involving exotic percussion such as bongos and being punctuated by statements from the brass, until it finally reaches an impressive orchestral flourish that sets the tone for the epic adventure ahead. The main theme is a triumph in that it perfectly captures the nostalgia of the past, yet looks forward into the future as well. Nishiki stated that the main theme gave him the most trouble, and his first 2 drafts for it were not well received. In fact, it gave him so much trouble that he even considered quitting the project, even though he had already finished half the soundtrack. Ultimately, he tried combining the first and second draft's themes for his third draft, which resulted in the theme herding game. It's a good thing he stuck through though, as to me, this is one of the most uplifting and adventurous tracks there is. As amazing as the main theme is, there is much more to the Octopath Traveler soundtrack. In Octopath Traveler, there are 8, obviously, characters and locations, and each of these receive their own theme. The melodicity is not abandoned here at all, with very strong melodies for each theme. As each character also had their own personality, Nishiki decided to give each character their own instrument to add individuality. For example, Nishiki used the flute to represent Ophelia the cleric, as it captured her holiness but also her warm and gentle side. My personal favorite character theme is the theme for Tresha the Merchant. Her overarching narrative is one of a journey, and I think the use of the harmonica perfectly captures that feeling of traveling. All the other character themes are definitely worth a listen, as they each have their own unique aspects. Nishiki used a similar technique of using specific instruments to capture the atmosphere of the locations as well. For example, he used synths for the Frostlands theme to evoke a frozen landscape. For the Highlands, he used a fuller symphonic sound to capture the feeling of being in a broad mountain range. Again, definitely listen to each of the location themes. Within each location, there are also towns which had their own themes. Nishiki stated that he made sure to use instruments emblematic of each region in the town themes. Flamesgrace, for example, the town in the Frostlands, uses the same synths as in the Frostlands. Despite being in a frozen area, the track is very warming, with the warm streams feeling like sitting by a fire. This is definitely one of the highlights of the soundtrack in my opinion.
The battle themes are also another highlight of the soundtrack. Nishiki composed several battle themes, each with their own concept behind them. Something unique to Octopath Traveler is how each character had their own introduction melody, which transitioned seamlessly into the battle music. These tracks are titled for X, depending on the character. What's impressive is how each of these transitions seamlessly to the battle music, while also capturing the character's personality. Because of player interaction, the music needed to loop infinitely, but also be able to transition at any moment to the battle themes the moment the player enters the battle. Nishiki accomplished this through using a 3-step process. First, the 4X track will loop infinitely until the player entered the battle, which would then immediately trigger the transition sequence, which then led to the opening of the battle theme. However, the transition had to be able to be triggered at any moment of the 4X track, which meant abandoning melodicity, so a melody could not get interrupted midway. Instead, to capture the character's identity, Nishiki used instrumentation to his advantage, implementing the main instrument used in the character's theme. Unfortunately, the transition between those tracks to battle themes are unavailable on the soundtrack album, but you can find some of them on YouTube for sure. The battle themes are heavily influenced by rock, employing drums, electric guitars, and synths, but are also still heavily orchestral. For example, in Decisive Battle No. 1, Nishiki described how he was striving for a sound as close to a true orchestral performance as possible, despite the usage of drums. If you ever need to feel adrenaline, the battle themes are your way to go. 2 additional battle themes of particular note are the one they call The Witch and Daughter of the Dark God, which are the only tracks in the game to employ vocals, using an operatic soprano. These battles occur at the end of the game and represent supernatural beings, which Nishiki wanted to make clear as seen in his operatic vocals.
After the defeat of the final boss, the ending theme begins. The ending theme is a medley of the game's location themes. At first, there was a proposal for a medley of character themes, but in the end, that proposal was not adopted. According to Nishiki, one of the reasons is that since Octopath Traveler is a game about traveling, a medley of the themes of traveled fields will fit the game concept better. In addition, because of the game's specifications, it's possible to clear the game without having to recruit all the characters, so it was thought it would be better not to use a character-themed medley. Nishiki stated that he made some bolder arrangements to the location themes so that it could function as a solid orchestral arrangement. The ending theme is definitely a highlight of the soundtrack, and could even serve as a concert suite for the soundtrack. So if there's one piece you should not miss on the soundtrack, it is definitely this one. There is so much more to discover and explore in this soundtrack that we would simply not have the time to go over everything. For example, we didn't even cover Amon's Stately Peaks, which is one of Nishiki's favorite pieces from the soundtrack. We encourage you to explore the soundtrack to find your favorite pieces in it, and we hope you have a fun journey doing it. Until next time, goodbye.